Welcome, my friends. I am Glennis Chester, your host for the NFRW Empower Hour, the series that has in-depth discussions on issues that are forefront in our culture today, giving you the tools to speak with authority on important topics wherever you go in today's political landscape. All the topics that I choose are important to me, and I hope they're important to you too. But today's topic is especially important because it is discussing education. We are going to talk about taking education in America back. I know you know what I mean when I say that, and you're going to be really excited about our speaker. But before we get to our actual program, I have just a little bit of housekeeping. Please keep yourselves muted. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will get to as many of those as we can at the end of the program. I'd also like to give a big thank you to Kim Bauer. She is working technical for me for today's meeting, and she is great. And if you know anything about these Zoom meetings, there's always so much that's going on in the background. It's always great to have someone that can help you out with the tech side of things. So now to introduce Congressman Byron Donalds. He is our special guest for today. I'm going to keep his bio very, very brief because I'm hoping he's going to tell us a little bit more about himself because his story is extraordinary. Congressman Donalds was elected in 2020 to represent Florida's Southwest 19th District. He was born in Brooklyn, went to school in Florida, where he started his career in finance. He was raised by a single mother and was not only an advocate for free and hello, how are you? For free school choice and educational freedom, but he is an excellent example of how that works out in the end. I mean, he is the product of school choice. So you can't add, I mean, if you had a little picture in the dictionary, he'd be right there. It's great. Congressman Donalds now lives in Naples with his wife, Erica, and 3 boys. And what a great man he is. I've been following you for a while, Congressman. You don't know that, I'm a total troll, but I have been. And I've seen several of your presentations, and you're so impressive. So I couldn't wait to get you on here and was so excited when Abby said that you would be willing to speak with us tonight. If you wouldn't mind, if you could please tell us just a little bit about your story and how you got here today. I think that would be great just to get us started.
Well, first of all, it's just great to be with everybody. Thanks for letting me be your speaker this, for this event. Really cool thing. I mean, look, I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. That's where I grew up. I guess, I would say, my mother was a school choice. She was a school choice mom before school choice was a thing. When I was in first grade, the public school system in New York wanted to put me on Ritalin. I was that kid that just wouldn't really sit still in class, always up, always calling out, finishing tests early. That was my life. That's who I was. But my mother wasn't going to let them, really do that to me. So what she decided to do was to take me out of public school and put me in a small private school, and it was an enormous economic sacrifice for her. But she believed in her son. She believed her son could actually, do more and be more than what the public school thought that I was capable of. And so, I'm the man I am today, really because of her sacrifice, the things that she gave up so I can have the best education possible. From Brooklyn, I went to school in Tallahassee. I went to college in Tallahassee, graduated high school in New York, and I went to FAMU, and I also went to Florida State. I graduated from Florida State, moved to Naples about 20 years ago, started my career in finance. And from there, just, got married, raised 3 sons. My oldest is in college now, I have a son in high school, a son in middle school. And, along the way, I caught the political bug. But I mean, really catching the political bug was something that nobody expected to happen, not even my mom. She didn't think it was ever going to happen. I never thought it was going to happen. But it was really the building blocks of what she always taught me as a young kid was, you don't just follow what everybody else is saying. You have to investigate things for yourself. You have to be willing to stand on your own 2 feet. Like everybody's not going to understand, but you have to have a strong enough conviction to just do the right thing. So, when I was about 30 years old and found politics, at first, I was a registered Democrat because I grew up in New York. I mean, it's just what it was. Never really gave much thought to it, but that's what I was registered as. And then when I started to think about economic policy, constitutionalism, the role of government, in the lives of free people, I actually realized I was quite conservative. And from that point on, I guess I kind of got the political bug. I served 4 years in the Florida legislature, in the Florida House, and then I was elected to Congress last fall. So that, in short, that's kind of the story.
That's the abridged version.
That's definitely the abridged version. It gets a lot more detailed than that, but that's definitely the abridged version.
Well, I love your story because, well, for one thing, it's very close to mine. I mean, my mother did the same thing to me. Actually, I was raised by a single mother, and I grew up in Las Vegas. And I don't know if any of you are from the Clark County area, but you know that public schools, not really that great. And my mom was like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work. And it was like, we got to find something else. And so she found this little school to put me in, and it was a struggle, but it was the best thing that ever happened. I got a much better education because of it, but you do what you have to do. So, but that's not always an option. In fact, I heard Kellyanne Conway recently said that said, middle class and rich kids have always had school choice, because if those kids were going to a bad school, their parents would either put them in private school or they could just move them and go to a different district. That was easy. But it's the kids that are stuck. It's the families that are stuck that they can't move. They can't afford to move. They are stuck where they are, and they're stuck in a bad school. Those are the ones that have no choices. And that's why this is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. And that's something I think the Republicans really need to use as our rallying cry. This is about helping people. This is about giving people the right to an education, because everybody can get around giving kids an education, because that's what we need to do. That, and, well, education, not indoctrination, but that's a whole another issue. So now, while I believe that education should be a state issue, absolutely, it will probably require action on the federal level before significant change can occur, just based on where we're at right now. What plans, or maybe you can tell me if there are any plans that you've heard being discussed to implement parental choice in the coming term? Have you heard anything from your colleagues? Is this something that other congressmen are talking about, that they're going to push, assuming we win big?
So actually, a couple things. I would say that at the federal level, there's actually a piece of legislation that it's not released yet, but it's actually something I'm working on in my office with a couple other members. And what it would do it would essentially voucherize federal spending in education down to the individual child. Something where the parent can actually make those determinations. Like take something like Title I funding. So Title I funding comes from the federal government. It goes directly into school districts. Now, what happens in school districts is that they typically like to keep all the money tied to the district itself. And so they will apply the money to certain schools where those are low performing schools, or to a certain area where it's a low performing area. That sounds good. But what about the kid? What about a poor kid who qualifies for Title I based upon economic status, but they happen to live in the school zone that's a school that is middle of the road or excels? It's an A school. Right. That kid is still a Title I kid. He just happens to go to an A school.
Right.
So the way the districts do Title I money is that money doesn't follow that kid. That kid is just assumed that he's going to get ahead because he's in a better quote unquote school environment. I think that what we should do is we should actually voucherize Title I money at the federal level, have that money follow the child. So if we're going to say that because you earn a certain amount of money or less, that you need additional funding for education, then let the parents be able to determine whether those funds are used for extra tutoring, if they're used for extra linguistics, whatever the case might be to help that child get another step ahead. That's something that they can do. If the parent decides that they don't want to use the funds, then okay, then the funds can go back to the district and the district can do with them as they please. But at least give the parent the option. Give them the ability to use those funds on behalf of their child. So that's one thing. That's a big thing at the federal level. That's something that we're working on. Another thing at the federal level that I'm working on, and a couple other colleagues are looking at, is the federal government actually runs the school districts for Indian reservations. So in tribal communities, the school districts are run by the federal government and funded by the federal government. Most people don't know that. So what you could do is say, all right, the federal government can be in the business of universal choice. And instead of having those children who live on reservations be tied to that school, give their parents the ability to take those dollars and take those children to wherever school they might want to go to. Why just say that you have to be trapped on the reservation? And like, again, I just think that we want to give people options. I'm not trying to demean a reservation or demean a child that goes to a low performing school. What you want to do is give the parents the ability to make economic choices on behalf of their child and give them that purchasing power to make those economic choices. Last point on, that's at the federal level. At the state level, there's a lot of things that are happening. Arizona, I think it was about 2 weeks ago now, they just passed and signed into law the largest education scholarship account in the country. They've moved the entire state into what are known as ESAs. Now, what does that mean? That means the parent has, in Arizona, now has the purchasing power to find a school of their choice and use state funds to pay for that education or to pay for a portion of that education. If a parent decides to send their kid to the local public school, well, then those funds just go to the local public school. But the parent is in first position of making those choices. Arizona is doing it. West Virginia is on the path to doing it. In Florida, we were like the leader in scholarship accounts for a long time. We were the first state to have different scholarship accounts for kids who were low income or children with special needs. And now we have our Florida, our Parent Empowerment Scholarship, which is actually going to grow every single year as a percentage of somebody's income. So it's going to grow about 1% every year until it's the entire population of Florida. But those are things that can be done. I think to the skeptics who typically are in the public school system, what I would tell the skeptics is that the public school system as it currently exists is still going to be the dominant player in education, primarily because there's not enough schools, there's not enough seats, not enough brick and mortar for all these children to go to school. I think the last number I saw is there's about 70 million children in the United States that go to school, 70 million. In Florida, we're 2.8 million students. So there's not enough seats for all these children to go. A lot of them are going to go to their zoned or traditional public school. But instead of being the only player in town and having a monopoly on education, they would just be the biggest player in education. Very different thing. It would open up so many other avenues of education that it actually will make competition come into the academic environment, and it would actually raise the bar for all of our students, whether they're in a public school, whether they're in a parochial school, religious school, charter school, homeschool. I think that part doesn't matter. I think that's the biggest thing I always try to tell people to make it simple is, we have an economy for telecommunications. And that's why telecommunications are great. We're doing Zoom calls right now. This is all the advance of telecommunications because we have a dynamic, competitive economy for telecommunications. Well, why don't we have a dynamic and competitive economy for education? Because if we had that, we would have so many different avenues that would propel our children forward to become the leaders that we need them to be for the future of the United States.
That's true. That's very true, because competition makes everybody better. Okay, so I was going to ask you about the Students Empowerment Act, and if you thought that that would be one way to implement educational freedom. Do you think expanding that would be a pretty straightforward way?
Are we talking about, which state are we talking about?
It's a federal act.
Okay, so that one, I gotta be honest, I'm not as familiar with that one. I'll tell you, I'm not as familiar with it. I think, honestly, any federal policy on education as it exists right now is not very good. In fact, we're actually doing it the complete wrong way. We're interjecting ourselves in a place that we should not be. I think that anything from the federal level that promotes choice, that actually block grants money directly to states so states can actually improve on choice initiatives is the way we should go. I'm not a big fan of federal education bills unless the proposals are to empower parents. And even into a broad perspective, I mean, look, the federal government just can't be all things to all people. And that's one of the big problems with the federal government now is they try to be all things to everybody and it just doesn't work. And it's not just education, it's just about every type of social spending program that exists in the federal government. It sounds good, but it doesn't create the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak.
Right. Okay, so you said that you were a proponent of a voucher system.
Yeah.
What would you think about like tax credits? Would that be something that you would be in favor of, or?
I could be in favor of tax credits, but you're also talking to somebody who thinks the tax code should be simplified. And so I think that, from a tax perspective, I would just like to see a much simpler code overall, as opposed to creating more credits and more avenues where people can deduct certain things, or rather we just have a flat code. I think the reason why I'd probably say I'm more in favor of vouchers as opposed to credits, we only need to look at the biggest voucher program in the country, and that's the SNAP program, or what we call food stamps. It used to be the federal government would either give you food directly. That's what we used to do. We used to give people food directly, and the food was terrible. Like, it was not good, and everybody knows that. The cheese was awful. The peanut butter was awful. I was on the stuff, so I know what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about it because I wasn't there. I mean, when I was a kid, we were getting that stuff as a kid. I remember standing in line to get it. It was awful food. Then the federal government said, you know what? How about we just give people like a little checkbook with these little coupons in it, and they can go to the supermarket and buy food. Yeah, and that's what we did. And we used to get the little book. It would come in the mail. You had to go to the local welfare benefit office and pick it up. You would go to the supermarket, rip the thing out, hand it to the cashier for food, and then you got food. What we realized was it was the most efficient way to deliver food to people who were truly in need. Far more efficient than tax credits. So all I'm doing is taking that same thing we've already done as a government, which actually has worked out well to address child hunger and family hunger, which is the food stamp program. No matter how anybody feels about it, it was the most efficient way from a federal level. All I'm saying, if it's good enough for food, it should be good enough for education.
Right, and that makes sense. Okay, so if the voucher program is something that you would advocate for more, what would you say to critics who claim that like homeschool parents would abuse a voucher system because they would take their voucher money and use it for video games and drugs instead of educating their kids? Well,
I think you can make the argument that any parent would do that. I think the way but I mean, it does. I mean, okay, so we shouldn't. Now we don't even use food stamps anymore. Now we just put EBT credits in a card. That's what we do now. It's an EBT card. It's not even a little book anymore. What I would argue is two things. One, the most unfortunate side of government programs is always going to be some modicum of fraud that you have to account for. I think in a universal choice environment or a voucher program, whatever you want to phrase it, the way you manage it is you don't give money directly to the parent. What you do is you have the parent take their child to a school, and then the school then essentially bills the state.
Okay,
So if you show up in the,
but how would you do
yeah,
that for homeschool then?
I think with homeschoolers, they can actually apply directly to the Department of Education for the materials they paid for, books, curriculum,
That's
anything that helps with the education, tutoring services, etc. I know some of and you can do the same thing if you're not a homeschool parent. If you decide to send your child, let's say this, in Florida, the allotment for a child is about $8,200. If you found a private school where the tuition was $7,000, and the question is, what do you do with the additional $1,200? Well, those $1,200 can be used to help that kid actually get to the school, transportation costs. It can be used for tutoring services. It can be used for enrichment services after school. As a country, we've made the decision long ago that funding education in K-12 is in the best interest of the United States. I do believe that. It's in the best interest of the country to fund the education of young people. But if we're going to do that, then let's actually give the people closest to that child every avenue to do what's in the betterment of that child. I think if you just give direct dollars, I'm not a fan of that. But there's no reason why a parent shouldn't be able to take their child to a provider, and then the provider actually bill the government to get the proceeds in order to pay the fees.
Great. Okay, now this one, I know how you're already going to answer this because I've heard you in the past, but I love it, so I'm going to ask you anyway. How would you respond to the fear in rural areas specifically that if money leaves the public and often only school in their area, then the economy will be decimated because it's the only school and there's no other options and it just won't work here because you can't get to school or there's just all these roadblocks. What do you do?
Well, I think the first thing is, number one, that's going to be the decision of the parents. If the parents make the decision to drive 30 miles to the closest school, I'm just using it as an approximation, or 20 miles, I mean, their children belong to them, not to the state, not to the government. So if a parent chooses to do that, that's what a parent chooses to do. I think the second part is that if we're looking at schools as a way to generate money in the local economy, then we're losing focus on what the purpose of schools actually are. The purpose of schools is not to make sure everybody has a job that is an adult. The purpose of school is to provide the best education possible to a young child so they're prepared to take on the next wave of leadership in our country, be the next entrepreneur, be the next employee, whatever the case might be. So I don't look at it from the perspective of, well, it's the biggest game in town from an economic perspective, so we got to keep it. Then that means this is for the adults and not for the kids. That's not the point. So I think we got to be focused on what the actual point is. I think at the end of the day, though, I wholeheartedly believe, I think that even if you had a universal choice program throughout the entire United States, in rural areas, probably 70% of the kids would still go to the traditional local public school, the town school. I don't think that would change, just because you're asking people to make a lot of different decisions for a bunch of reasons I can't even quantify. People will just make other decisions. The one thing I know about people is that people are going to make decisions in their best interest. That is 100%. That's the one thing we all do well. We are all looking out for ourselves. We make decisions in our own interests. And so I actually would trust people to make those decisions, would make it a much more dynamic situation in education, and have central government make those decisions, not being able to even understand all the different nuances in any given family structure, whether it's rural, urban, suburban.
Okay. Tell me how you feel about specialized schools like trade schools, things like that.
Yeah.
How do you think that would work in an economy where it wasn't all your traditional schools that we have now?
I think that's where we should be. I'm an all of the above person. I'm not I don't look at this stuff as this is the only thing that works right now because I have some master plan of how we're going to create the next economy. I think anybody who comes along with plans saying they have all the answers is somebody who's not smart enough to understand that they don't know everything. So that's what I think about that. I think that when you're talking about trade schools, we should have never unwound trade education in the United States. I think it's been to the detriment of a lot of now people who are my age, been to the detriment of a lot of 40 somethings in the United States. Trade education, if you talk to contractors, developers, manufacturers, they are struggling to find talent. And the talent's there, so much so that now high schools are starting to bring back the trades because everybody understands, like, why would you send somebody to a 4-year university to get a degree that costs 45 grand, but they don't have the skill set to work, in a manufacturing capacity or in a construction capacity, where if they just got certified coming out of high school, they could have went and made 90,000 a year. Skip college, not have the debt. I mean, like, this is real world stuff. And so I think that we should, like, trade education should not be looked down upon, should not be demonized. It shouldn't be viewed like, oh, you're not smart enough to go to Harvard, because there's people that go to Harvard that ain't that smart. I'm just telling you right now, talk to the graduates, they're not that bright. They might do well on a test, but they're not bright. They don't understand how the world really works. So again, it's, for me, all these options should be available. I think that if you had a situation where money flowed, you would see more trade schools open. You know who would open them? You would have contractors say, you know what? We're going to open up a high school where the focus is construction. You would see where the airline industry is struggling to find mechanics. They're struggling to find pilots, where there's a definite need there. There's so many needs that aren't being addressed. And if we had our education apparatus in a much more flexible and vibrant way, we could address so many of the economic ills that are happening now, not because there's some central plan out of Congress or the state legislature, but because the economy, as like flexible and massive as it is, would actually be a driver of a lot of these decisions, because people will get real information that they see in their face, as opposed to waiting for Washington to decide what the next wave of education is going to be. There's actually a great, it was a essay written by F.A. Hayek. F.A. Hayek is basically out of the Austrian School of Economics, same school that Milton Friedman came out of, same way of thinking. And essentially the essay was about the value of information. And it's like a 12-page essay. And what he basically says is, it is better to have disjointed, non-scientific information than centralized scientific information. Because centralized scientific information is late, it takes forever to compile, it takes forever to actually sort through to make decisions. And then, but by the time a central planner makes the decision, everybody else has already moved on to the next thing. Right. But non-scientific, decentralized information, that's what you see when you go to the supermarket, when you walk down the street. It's what your local butcher, your local contractor, your local auto dealer, local auto mechanic, tailor shop, they see this stuff every day. They make decisions based upon what's happening right then and there, based upon what they see and what they experience, as opposed to it all being tabulated by somebody in the federal government.
Well, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought of that before, but that's very true. I know that my husband says to me, in the apocalypse, no one's going to be looking for a lawyer. They're going to be looking for someone who can put a radio together. So,
radio, who has guns, and who can get a radio, who has guns, who has food, who has water.
That's right. I mean,
that's what they're going to be looking for.
Farmer, a mechanic, just saying.
Right.
But yeah, no one's really going to need a lawyer. So anyway, okay. So my last thing is, the National Federation of Republican Women is made up of over 65,000 really, really strong political activists. In such a pivotal time as this, what can we do to help push the ball across the line to get freedom in education? What is your best advice to us? And then we'll go to some questions in the chat.
So I will be brief so we can try to get to as many questions. First thing I'll say is, listen, National Federation of Republican Women, I know you guys are tough. You guys are tough. You get it done. I know that. Because, the Republican women in my community, man, they're tough as nails. And I know you guys get the job done for our party. We would not be remotely as successful as we are without you guys. So I just want to thank you for that and all you continue to do. What to do next? I would say at the state level, you really got to push on these state legislators and much these state House members, but really these state Senate members. The state Senate's a funky situation. They largely get left alone. Nobody pays much attention to them unless something really blows up in the state. If you're in a red state like Florida or like Texas, everybody's basically like, let's not make this place like New York or California and keep the taxes relatively low and everything will be all right. And, as somebody who served in the state legislature, it's easy to skate by if you have a governor who is no nonsense and gets the job done, because then there's no pressure on you. So I would say your advocacy on education has got to be with the state Senate. The state Senate is the place to focus on. Because in the state house, you'll have enough Republicans who will be like, absolutely, this is what we need to do. Because typically House members are the ones that are more conservative. They're typically the ones that are more active. As somebody who serves in the House on the state level and now on the federal level, we always say the Senate is the place where good ideas go to die. That's just what Senates typically are like. So your activism should be on the state Senate. And I would specifically focus it in on obviously the leader of the chamber, whoever the Senate president is, but it would also be on the appropriations chairman, the education appropriations chairman, and whoever the education chairman is. That's where I would put the focus on those four positions. If they get on board, then it'll be something that can move through your legislature. Because typically the House and states will do it. It's the Senate where this stuff typically stops. And if you got a governor that's not on board, then elect a better governor.
Yes.
That's about it.
Excellent. All righty. So Kim, what do we have in the chat? I know it was moving around a lot, so I think we probably have some good questions.
We have a lot of different comments regarding what we were talking about, but there's a specific question that's separate from that we have not touched upon, and it was to the Congressman. Please speak about the role of the teachers' unions in making it difficult to offer good public education.
Oh, yeah. So the teachers union, this would be my pleasure. I try to separate the union from the teachers because from a political perspective, when people hear teachers union, a lot of people don't like it, but they love the teachers that they know. And so people tend to be less politically proactive against the teachers union. I think the issue is the union itself is only concerned about one thing, and it's having as many teachers as possible that are unionized. So I look at it like, if charter schools were unionized, the teachers union would love charter schools, but charter schools are not unionized. So the teachers union hates charter schools. And so that's where I would put the focus. Their focus is just about the union itself. And then the numbers in the union and the power in the union. Specific policy I would propose to challenge the union. Paycheck protection is number one. To me, in 2022, it is obscene that a teacher is forced to have their union dues deducted from their paycheck before they even get their money. That is unconscionable to me. If a teacher wants to be a part of the union, then the teacher can write a check to be a part of the union the same way they write a check to be a part of a gym or to sign up on Netflix. On Netflix, they sign up on Netflix with their money. They're not forced by Netflix to have to be in Netflix before they get their net pay. So why should they be forced to pay the union before they get their check? That is ridiculous. That's one of the first things I think should happen. But it's also important to understand with the union, the Democrats, especially at the state level, cannot get elected without the union. If the union does not support them, they will lose elections. 100%. So in a lot of these areas where there are Democrat members of the legislature, the political work that has to be done is with parents in those districts. Because the parents can say, you know what, I'm sick of this person. We need to go a new way. If that starts to happen where it's harder for Democrats to get elected in state house districts, and this is state house specific now, because it's easy to elect and defeat people in the state house with the right political energy. If that starts to happen where Democrats are getting pressure to get elected to the state house, then your opinions on choice change drastically. Because the Democrat is going to be like, so looking at the union like, hey, you guys are supposed to be protecting me, but I'm about to lose because these guys want choice. And that puts the Democrat member on the spot. If you talk to Black voters want school choice more than any other segment. But what they don't really get to is the Democrat member that represents them is anti-choice because the union is anti-choice. So that's a major political hurdle that I think in this environment we can actually cross. That speaks to the power of the union. A friend of mine, he's a Democrat member in Florida's legislature, known him for years. We are friendly. We're good friends, but we disagree on politics. Our politics, I'm one way, he's the other. He voted for a bill that the Republicans brought on education. Now, he was with the unions on everything else, but on this one piece, he was for it. The unions pulled his endorsement. And he came to my office, was like, I've been with them all the time. I go one way against them, and now they pull my endorsement. And I was like, that's where they are. You got to be lockstep or you're out. And that's what's happened now with the union. If you're not lockstep with them, then they start pulling endorsements. You have to put pressure on these Democrat members in state houses. Putting pressure on them with their voters in their communities about school choice creates a major issue with respect to them supporting the union. If that dam breaks, the union doesn't have a leg to stand on, and then they're going to be caught in a rock and a hard place, which is where you want to be politically.
Excellent. I love it. What else we got, Kim?
When the voucher concept first came out, it was supported by both the left and the right. Why wouldn't the Republicans be for improving the public schools instead of bailing on them? Not sure what that means.
I don't think it's a matter of bailing on public schools. It's just more about what's better. Like I guess here's the way to see it. Here's the way I look at it. Better yet. When we built a public school system, the purpose was we were taking all these kids off the farm, giving them a basic set of education to move them into an industrial economy. That's actually where the public school system originated from. If we were building an educational system today, would we build what we have right now? No, we would. If we were starting from scratch, we would not build the current public school system. We would not build it. We would build a far more dynamic education system that could address all the various needs of our economy that we know now and the future needs that we can't even contemplate. Because we would desire flexibility, because you could have kids going to computer science, engineering, law, accounting, high finance, medium finance, structural engineering, road maintenance, road construction, housing construction, energy apparatuses, nuclear energy, the future innovations that exist there, medical science, medical building, medical technicians. There's so many different avenues that we have in our economy right now that exist today that did not exist when we created the public school system. So for me, it's not bailing on the system. It's actually progressing into a system that works best for children, not for the bureaucracy. Like I said it maybe 6 years ago now. If you're asking me to choose between the bureaucracy and kids, I'm choosing kids. Period. Full stop. As far as I'm concerned, there is no
most parents would agree with that.
The kids are the reason the bureaucracy exists, not the other way around. And so I'm choosing that. So I don't think it's a matter of bailing on the public school system. I think it's a matter of doing what's in the best interest of children. And now to speak specifically to the public school system, they have a choice to make in the choice environment. Their choice is, do they want to adapt and become a better company? Or do they want to be Blockbuster Video? Because Blockbuster Video is not around anymore because they chose not to adapt. BlackBerry is not around anymore because it took them too long to try to adapt. Motorola is still around because Motorola understood, hey, you know what? This industry is changing. We need to change with it. or they could have been gone to. And so I think that's for the public school system is they have to adapt. If they don't adapt, why would we fund them?
Right. I agree. What else we have, Kim?
This was from earlier, so it's back. It says, what types of requirements will the federal dollars have attached when the students take them to private schools? Will the private schools be required to accept all students, or can they pick and choose the students?
No, I think that as long as you're just not dealing with some of the basic, non-discrimination policies that currently exist in law, not the stuff that the political left wants to put in, but, race, sex, religion, the basic stuff that everybody vastly agrees on, that's fine. But then also you can't step outside the First Amendment. There is a freedom of religion. So if you're an atheist and you want to send your son to a Baptist school, then that's on you if they teach Christianity.
Mhm.
You're an atheist. You chose to go to a place where they teach religion. Don't expect them to stop what they're doing. If you don't want to do that, then go somewhere else. It's a free country. You got choices. Listen, when Disney started doing their foolishness, I have Disney Plus sitting over there on the TV. I canceled my Disney Plus. And I like Star Wars. I'm a Star Wars guy. I love this stuff. I'm mad because I want to watch the new Obi-Wan Kenobi series, but I made a choice. I don't support their foolishness. I turned off my Disney Plus. I haven't been back to Disney. That's my choice as a consumer. I'm not going to go and demand that Disney changes the way they want to operate as a company. That's their problem. I'm going to avert my choices. And so I think that there's a basic tolerance we want to have it in the country. I think everybody wants to be at a tolerance level. But this whole thing where you're going to go into another institution and tell them they have to change or else, I don't agree with that. If you don't want to deal with that institution, don't go. It's a free country. If I'm giving parents the dollars to make purchasing decisions, you don't have to go there and buy their products. You can go somewhere else. And that's okay.
Excellent. I love it. I think that's a great answer. I totally agree with you because, it's not always just that the school is in a bad neighborhood or, doesn't teach the classes that you want. Sometimes they're just not teaching your child. My granddaughter goes to a great school. It's a great school. It's rated really well. She's going into the 3rd grade and doesn't read. She doesn't know her alphabet. Going into the 3rd grade, and this is an upper middle class area, there's no excuse for that. And when I ask her about her teacher, she tells me that they're watching movies and the teacher's braiding her hair. And I'm like, that's not why you're there.
It's totally true. It happens a lot.
Yeah,
it happens a lot. It's awful. I think one of the things that's happened, and this is where the public school system took us, they made a decision, I want to say it was maybe 20 years ago, overall, to stop teaching phonics in school. So they teach sight words.
Right.
And so because it was easier to pass the test with sight words. But here's the problem. When the language gets more difficult, you don't know how to enunciate and how to phonetically understand the word. So sight words only get you but so far. And so there are schools right now that are actually moving back to phonics. And that's an important building block for children across the board. My wife, she runs a nonprofit that starts charter schools that are classically based, that teach phonetical reading, so on and so forth. And I just think that stuff is critical. You have to have the right building blocks for children. But a lot of the public school system, virtually all of it, went down this progressive mode of we don't have to teach phonics, sight words is good enough. We don't have to do rote memorization anymore. Kids can learn in other ways. And I'm not saying there are kids who can learn those ways, but the building block of education is repetition and mastery. That is the building block. I love sports. I coach a lot of kids. I coached my sons, when they were younger and I was less busy. But if I was going to teach a kid how to shoot a jump shot, I just make them do it over and over and over and over and over again until he masters the form and the footwork. It's not one of those things like, hey, watch this video and then go to the driveway and figure it out. No, it's not how you teach them. It's with discipline, repetition, and then mastery. And that's just the way it is.
That's the way it is. Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate your being here with us. I know there's probably 1,000 more questions, and I could talk to you all night about education because it is so, so important to all of us, and especially to me because, well, I've been fighting with it here. But I do appreciate you so, so much in the fight that you are in our nation's capital. And we're here with you. If there's anything that we can do for you, please let us know because we are on your side. We will back you up.
Sure, absolutely. It was great to be with you guys, you know, and when you do your national conference, man, I'll come out wherever you guys are. I'll come out and spend some time with you. But it was great. Thanks for having me on this evening.
I will send Abby our information for our next meeting.
Sure.
Okay. So ladies, I hope you enjoyed this month's Empower Hour. Please join me next month on Tuesday, September 13th, when we will discuss healthcare. Do Republicans even have a plan? Gosh, I hope we do, because we have to get on the ball because we are going to be in charge very, very soon, I hope. And we need to start on day one, just like President Trump did, day one. So join me on September 13th. And don't forget, we also have bite-sized tools on the last Tuesday of the month. So join me for that, where we will talk about, what are we talking about? Bite-sized tools is Achievement Award. So join me for bite-sized tools on the last Tuesday of the month. And until next month, bye-bye.